10 for 10 for the week ending September 27, 2025. Want a quick 10-minute wrap-up of the week's compliance news? Well, this is the podcast for you, 10 for 10, where Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, wraps up 10 top compliance stories which occurred over the past week. If you don't know, Tom has a daily news podcast, appropriately called the Daily Compliance News, and 10 for 10 wraps up the week. So get up on a Saturday morning, have a great cup of coffee, and check out 10 for 10, the podcast which gives you the week's top compliance news. Are you interested in upping your game in compliance through the use of AI and machine learning technology? Well, check out my latest book, Upping Your Game, How Compliance and Risk Management Move to 2030 and Beyond. You can check it out in the show notes. I've got a link to the purchase at Amazon.com. Upping Your Game. We begin with a story from the BBC, which reports that Nicolas Sarkozy, former president of France, was sentenced to 5 years in jail from corruption allegations or a criminal conspiracy related to millions of illicit euro funds received from the late Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi. The Paris criminal court acquitted him of other charges, but the ruling means he will spend time in jail even if he launches an appeal, which he says he will do. He is 70 and he was president from 2007 to 2012, and it's a sad day for former President Sarkozy. Next up, from Reuters, reports that Radio Shack became a Ponzi scheme. Yes, remember Radio Shack? Well, if you're of a certain age, you fondly remember them as a nostalgic company. Well, a certain private equity fund bought up many of these and then was able to tap into a wide variety of investors to essentially create a Ponzi scheme for these companies. Their claim was that they would move them to e-commerce, and of course none of that worked out, but the Ponzi scheme still existed, and thousands lost millions of dollars from this fraudulent scheme. Next up, from Reuters, commentary on False Claims Act liability. When do claims for healthcare reimbursement result from the anti-kickback statute violations? The Department of Justice in July and the Department of Health and Human Services jointly announced the renewal of their False Claims Act Working Group, a partnership aimed at strengthening the use of FCA in combating healthcare fraud. The anti-kickback statute is historically the largest driver of FCA liability, and it results from reimbursement claims that are false for the purposes of the FCA. And it is a very powerful test and something that every compliance professional in the healthcare industry needs to be aware of. Next up, from eFinancial Careers, a dispiriting article entitled, "I'm a Chief Compliance Officer, I fantasize about resigning." And it goes through to detail this particular Chief Compliance Officer, his frustrations he has in trying to actually effectuate a best practices compliance program inside of his organization. And he fantasizes about firing. Well, frankly, my advice is if you're that miserable in your job, perhaps it's time to look elsewhere and or move on. Next up, from Reuters, a second article, which discusses the ongoing potential forced sale of Citgo Petroleum Corporation, which was recently, or until recently rather, owned by the Venezuelan national energy company PDVSA. It was purloined from or taken from PDVSA for PDVSA's endemic failure to pay its creditors, and multiple court orders over multiple years have moved us towards this date. So it looks like a judge allowed an affiliate of the hedge fund Elliott Investment Management to move forward and actually take ownership of Citgo Petroleum. What that means for Citgo is unknown at this point, whether they'll just break it up and sell it for the creditors or actually continue it as an ongoing business operation. Next up, the first of two articles from the Financial Times, and this one is about the health insurer Humana is fighting the U.S. Health Department in court over what it claims are 3 disconnected phone calls to the company's customer service line in a dispute that could cost it billions. The ratings for companies to get additional bonuses or lucrative bonus payments is in large part based upon a system about calls and whether they are responded to. And in the rating period, the Humana's shares sank after company results were disappointing, but also that they hung up on 3 test calls. Now Humana says it's unfair that they are being judged this way when they knew exactly how they were being judged. Our second story from the Financial Times, it brings up our old friend Wirecard, as 2 businessmen were found guilty this past week of falsifying documents for senior execs at Wirecard as a part of one of Europe's biggest accounting frauds, certainly in this century. A British national and a Singaporean used documents to hoodwink auditor EY into thinking the German fintech startup had more money stored away than actually existed. In June 2020, Wirecard disclosed that $1.9 billion said to be in its accounts did not exist. The subsequent scandal was a huge one. Next up, from the BBC, Air India crash. The families of the victims have sued Boeing and Honeywell in U.S. District Court over this crash. This certainly is more bad news for Boeing as it's desperately trying to get out of having a monitor or any oversight of its compliance or remediation functions in its purported settlement by the Department of Justice. So this is certainly more bad news for Boeing. Next up, from Bloomberg, Vietnam has jailed an ex-parliament official in a corruption trial. A former senior parliamentary official has been sentenced to over 5 years in jail in a corruption case linked to a construction company accused of bribing its way into winning deals. The person in question, or rather the company, or the firm rather, Thuan Ong Group, won contracts that caused $3.67 billion in loss to Vietnam, and now has been jailed over all of this. And our final story comes to us in a press release from the U.S. State Department, which has designated 2 former Haitian public officials for involvement in significant corruption. Their involvement was during their time in public office, and the action renders them and their immediate families ineligible for entry into the United States. The State Department said they abused their position by interfering with public processes of the Haitian government. The corruption and destructive acts had serious effects on U.S. national interests going forward. So apparently there's still some non-approval of corruption even in the Trump administration. The designations affirm the U.S. commitment to ensuring accountability for individuals who, through their corruption, work to destabilize the government of Haiti. I hope you have a great weekend, and if you want more on any of the stories, you can check them out in the links that I've put in each one of the show notes. And I hope you'll join us again next week for another 10 for 10. This is Tom Fox again. 10 for 10 is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. I'd also urge you to check out the Daily Compliance News, which posts every week from Monday to Friday, where I give 4 curated stories of bribery, corruption, and compliance events that will allow you to help you start your day as well. So check out the Daily Compliance News and subscribe or rate and review to both 10 for 10 and the Daily Compliance News. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of 10 for 10. I hope you'll check out the newest podcast in the Compliance Podcast Network, the Compliance Tip of the Day. In Compliance Tip of the Day, I give a 5 to 8 minute summary of one tip that you can integrate into your compliance program or put together for greater compliance program efficiency. Finally, if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, I am preparing a new season of Adventures in Compliance where I go through the 4 novels of Sherlock Holmes. Hear it on the Compliance Podcast Network.